Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Who am I? A question as old as humanity itself. From ancient sages to modern thinkers, the search for the self has led to profound discoveries, shaping how we understand not only ourselves, but the very nature of existence. This journey is not simply about introspection, but about transcending our limitations, moving beyond the fixed self, and ultimately discovering a path to true freedom. Part 1. The Illusion of a Fixed Self. In Buddhism, the concept of anatta, or no self, challenges the very foundation of how we perceive our identity. According to Buddhist thought, there is no single, unchanging self. Instead, what we experience as I is a collection of ever-shifting elements, sensations, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, all interacting moment by moment. These components, collectively known as the five aggregates, are like a flowing river, seemingly continuous, but, in reality, in constant motion. Imagine, then, that the self is like a flame. It appears steady, but it is, in fact, being created anew at each instant. The self, in this sense, is a phenomenon, a construct with no permanent essence. In understanding this, Buddhism tells us we can begin to free ourselves from suffering. For suffering arises when we cling to an idea of self that is solid, immovable, when, in reality, we are as fluid as water, as ephemeral as a breath. Part 2. The Gap of the Self, Finding Freedom in the In-Between. Buddhist teachings on the self introduce a powerful concept, the gap of the self. This gap represents the fleeting spaces where the self momentarily disappears. Just as a breath has a natural pause between inhaling and exhaling, the self, too, has brief moments where it flickers out of existence, revealing a gap. In these gaps, we catch a glimpse of the freedom that lies beyond fixed identity. These are moments where thoughts, labels, and judgments fall away, and what remains is pure awareness. In the Stoic tradition, freedom is similarly found in the acceptance of what lies beyond our control. Stoics believed that true peace comes from releasing attachment to external outcomes, allowing the self to exist within the natural order without resistance. For the Stoics, the self is not bound by external definitions or outcomes, but is free to observe and respond within its own control. Like the Buddhist notion of the gap, Stoicism suggests that freedom emerges in the spaces where the self is unburdened, in the recognition of what can and cannot be controlled. Part 3. The Self in the Web of Existence. The Buddhist concept of dependent origination further illuminates the self's interdependence with the world. Here, the self doesn't exist in isolation, but is a product of endless relationships and conditions. The air we breathe, the people we meet, the emotions we feel, all are threads in a vast, interconnected web. In seeing ourselves as part of this web, we start to understand that the self isn't separate from others or the world. It's deeply, intricately connected. Stoic philosophy echoes this notion through its emphasis on our unity with the cosmos. Stoics saw the individual as part of the universal order, or cosmos. For them, the self is inseparable from nature and the greater flow of existence. Epictetus, one of Stoicism's prominent voices, advised focusing on what we can control, our thoughts, choices, and actions, while letting go of external events beyond our grasp. This way, we align ourselves with nature and experience a profound sense of freedom, not because we control everything, but because we accept the limits of our control. In the Stoic view, true peace lies in understanding our place within the larger scheme. We are each, in a way, a drop within an ocean, distinct yet part of an unfathomable whole. And by aligning our will with nature, we free ourselves from the unnecessary suffering caused by attachment to outcomes. Part 4. Transcending the Ego Through Awareness. Another thinker, Eckhart Tolle, brings a modern perspective to this ancient wisdom. He speaks of the ego as the mind-created self, a construct rooted in past and future, but rarely, if ever, present in the now. Tolle encourages us to inhabit the present moment, suggesting that true freedom comes when we cease identifying with our thoughts, emotions, and roles. When we live in the now, the ego's grasp weakens. Our identity becomes fluid, not confined to past experiences or future anxieties. It's an experience of consciousness that transcends the limitations of the self, leading us to a state of what he calls presence, a state where we are fully engaged in the richness of life without the burden of self-centered thoughts. Imagine each thought as a cloud passing in the sky. Tolle would suggest that we observe these clouds without attachment, neither clinging to them nor rejecting them, simply letting them drift by. This act of witnessing, he explains, is a gateway to discovering a self beyond the ego. Part 5. The practice of letting go. How then do we apply these ideas? Both Buddhism and Stoicism, as well as thinkers like Tolle, offer practical methods to soften our attachment to the self. In Buddhism, meditation plays a central role in this process. Through mindful observation of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations, we learn to see them as transient, coming and going without requiring us to identify with them. Over time, this practice cultivates a sense of detachment, allowing us to let go of rigid self-views and experience life with greater openness. One powerful practice for exploring the gap of the self is through breath awareness. By focusing on the pause between breaths, the space between inhaling and exhaling, we can begin to sense a subtle moment of stillness where the self fades away. This is the gap, the in-between, a fleeting place of pure presence, unbound by ego. In such moments, we experience a profound freedom, touching a sense of self that is expansive and connected, rather than fixed and separate. Stoicism offers its own method, a practice of self-reflection. Stoics encourage us to daily examine our thoughts and actions, asking ourselves whether we're acting out of genuine character or mere ego. By doing so, we strengthen our control over what's within, our minds, attitudes, and responses, while loosening our hold on things beyond our reach. Tolle's practice of presence complements these ancient approaches. By simply bringing our awareness to the present moment, to the feel of our breath, the sounds around us, the sensations within us, we can break free from the constraints of ego. In this state, we find clarity and peace, untethered from the past, unburdened by the future. Part 6. The freedom beyond self. Together, these philosophies and practices reveal a profound insight. The self we cling to is not who we truly are. In fact, it may be the very thing that limits us. By questioning our beliefs about the self, by observing its impermanence and interconnectedness, we begin to access a deeper freedom, a freedom that doesn't depend on external achievements or validation. Imagine for a moment, stepping outside yourself, seeing your worries, desires, and fears as passing phenomena. Imagine the peace in simply letting them be. This is the essence of Anatta, of no self, and the heart of Stoic resilience. It's not the absence of self, but the liberation from the self's constraints, a way of being that is open, accepting, and fully present. The journey of letting go is not one of denial or avoidance. It's a journey of transformation. It's a path that leads us away from the confines of ego, toward an experience of existence that is spacious, interconnected, and ever-evolving. As we release our grip on the self, we start to see life as it truly is, a tapestry of moments, each one complete in itself. In this state, we are no longer confined by labels, stories, or fixed identities. We are simply present, witnessing life's beauty and complexity with openness. This is the freedom that Buddhism, Stoicism, and modern thought invite us to explore. It is a freedom rooted in awareness, acceptance, and a profound understanding of our place within the whole. Ultimately, the path of letting go reveals not emptiness, but fullness. In the flickering gaps of the self, we find that we are not separate from life, but are In fact, life itself, a vast and interconnected reality, breathing, flowing, and evolving with each passing moment. The journey to the true self is one of release, not of gain. And in this release, we find a deeper peace than we ever imagined possible.